Smoking and toasting, joking too. Sipping and roasting is what we do. Light 'em up, drink 'em down. Whiskey and cigars all around. Cheers, y'all.
Well. Welcome, my friends, to this episode number 188 of the world-famous Smokin' and Toastin'.
We're halfway to 200.
Yes, sir. We are the program that's all about craft beer, fine spirits, and hand-rolled cigars. We are brought to you by B&B Butchers and Restaurant at 1814 Washington Ave in Houston and in the shops at Clear Fork and Fort Worth, and they are open for dining, so with social distancing, strictures in place. So it's a good thing. Good to have them back.
Pretty awesome. And remember, if you're not wanting to actually be in that social situation, you can go in their butcher shop.
That's right.
And go get your steak of your dreams and go cook it yourself.
You can be social at home. So
that's right.
So like my wife's birthday is coming up, and I was asking her yesterday. I was like, so are we to the place where we feel comfortable, like going out to a restaurant for a birthday dinner? We had our anniversary, several weeks ago, and what we did was we, kind of splurged on a nice dinner from a steakhouse, but I went by and picked it up curbside and ate it at home, and that was nice. It was different, but like, are we ready to go back out? We haven't decided. I don't know. Different people are kind of stepping carefully back out into the world at different times, and you and I are here in the studio, but of course we're appropriately distanced and all of that. So I don't know. Well, I guess we'll have to figure it out. Where are you at on this?
So for people who are going, I just want to point out a couple things. So, and this is probably not our audience because I see it with a whole bunch of people who are not really our audience. But if you're going to go out in public, you're going to wear a mask. I think it's a good idea. I've been wearing a mask, generally speaking, if I'm going to be in a place where I'm going to be closer than 6 feet
sure.
to anybody. If I'm walking down the street, I don't feel like I need to wear a mask if there's nobody around me.
If there's nobody around, sure, yeah.
So I think a little self-isolation is an okay thing. But if I'm going to be in a public place, a restaurant, a shopping establishment, whether it's a grocery store or whatever, I wear a mask. I can't tell you how many people I see wearing a mask, and the mask goes under their nose.
I don't understand
what
it at all.
What the hell could you even be thinking?
I was even thinking, should we do Mask 101 on the show today? But, it's not really our thing.
That's amazing to me.
I will tell you, I went by Casa de Monte Cristo earlier today, stopped by and saw our friend Steve there, and who manages the shop that's at 610 and Westheimer-ish.
Just south of Westheimer,
in Houston. And so I asked Steve, who's always a fun guy to talk to. I was like, so man, how you doing? He goes, well, I'm better now. And he then proceeded to tell me that, they're having all of their employees wear masks, which is, a good precaution, right? But he said he's better now because he got one of those masks that, like, wraps around your neck and you pull it up.
Oh, I've got one of those.
Yeah,
the
right.
neck gaiter,
as opposed to the ones like I've got this one.
That's what I usually wear, because then you can just leave it on your neck.
Well, and he was saying it's better for him because to smoke a cigar, he can just go, take a puff, exhale, and back up.
Well, if you follow the logic of the people that put the mask under their nose, if you want to wear a mask and smoke a cigar, just cut a hole in it.
Yeah.
It'll make just as much sense. Exactly as much sense.
I think you're probably right. Speaking of things that don't make much sense, we've got 187 episodes under our belt, and we're on 188 today, as Ian pointed out, halfway to 200. And we have, I think, got a really good-looking show for you today. We're going to talk about great bourbons to drink right now.
Right now.
Yep. And also, one of the things we've been teasing for the last couple of weeks and haven't gotten to, and I promise that we will today, is the tastes, the flavors, the styles that are most popular among craft beer drinkers. So we never got to that last week, did we?
Oh, no.
I talked about it. We never got to it.
We have threatened the right now one for this is our third week.
Yeah,
that we have to actually get to it.
That's just bad show management on my part. That's all that is. So we got.
I like that we can just blame you.
Yes, and we should. We got all of that coming up on the show. Plus, we do have drinking news today. We'll tell you about a virtual tap room that lets you drink with your buddies if you're trying to stay home still, which is, not necessarily a bad idea. And tastings on the show today. Really excited about this. From Urban Chestnut Brewing in St. Louis, their Urban Underdog American Lager will be what we open with this week. From Pasa Robles, California, Firestone Walker's Luponic Distortion IPA that was released in February 2020. Now, Luponic Distortion is a series.
Yes.
And they were numbering them, but they seem to have stopped numbering. So I had a hard time figuring out what the name of this beer was, other than just Luponic Distortion.
Right.
We've had Luponic Distortion, one of the previous releases, on the show before, but this one looks really interesting. And I was going to say Luponic Distortion and then list the 3 sort of flavors that they list, like kiwi and something, but I couldn't pronounce the last one, so I have no idea how to pronounce that. I'll sound like an idiot.
It's going to happen at some point, right?
Luponic Distortion IPA, February 2020. And then from Worthington, Ohio, Zaftig Brewing's Bourbon Barrel-Aged Wee Heavy Scottish Ale, which I think is probably
right up my alley.
Right up your alley. Yes, sir. So looking forward to that. And then a bourbon on the show today, as we talk to you about 8 great bourbons to drink right now. We might add a 9th here, depending on how this one tastes. I see not.
That Smooth Ambler, is that what that says?
Yes, Smooth Ambler. It's their Contradiction Bourbon. It is a mixed bourbon, but Smooth Ambler was named like USA Today's top micro distillery, top whiskey distillery. What does it say on the? It says that on that little wrap around the top.
America's best craft whiskey distillery, USA Today 10 best.
Yeah, so that's not a bad
Reader's
endorsement.
Choice 2018 Smooth Ambler.
So it's not a bad endorsement. So we'll get to that as the program matures and continues, and we're really excited about that. Plus, I mentioned drinking news. It's a doozy today, so we'll be looking forward to that. But we must start drinking first. So, Ian, it's great to be back in the studio. We're lining up some guests for the next several shows, I hope, and so excited about that. But it's just you and me today, and I thought this is a perfect time to inquire if you'd had anything interesting to smoke this week.
Let me think about that for a minute. Yes.
I had a feeling.
Yeah. So I've been on a mission to try and refill my humidor a little bit.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that last week.
Right. So I bought some lawnmowers, and I caught a couple things on sale, and that was good. So I'm getting there. Getting there a little bit at a time. I still haven't made it back down to hang out with Alan, which I may do this tomorrow or the next. And make that happen. So let's see. I did go. It's funny because I missed you at Casa de Monte Cristo this morning.
I think we crossed paths. I went, but I didn't stay. I got a cigar and talked to Steve and
I like that little back corner. Like you go into the little lounge there, and there's a little back corner, and there was nobody in the lounge, and I like it because it's just isolated. I'm less distracted by anything, and I just have me time.
If I had realized you were there, I would have come into the lounge and then started having a really annoying and loud conversation with someone else on my phone.
On speakerphone.
On speakerphone, yeah.
Like, I love it when people do the speakerphone thing in a small room.
Yeah.
And they hold the speakerphone by their face.
Yes.
Like, with the same muscles that you hold it by your face and have it on speakerphone, you could hold it to your ear, and then we only hear half of your annoying shithead conversation.
And that's annoying enough, I'll say.
But that's not fully the true annoyance.
Exactly.
It's super annoying when you get the speakerphone guy.
Oh yeah,
that wants and he's got it cranked up too.
And you hear him say, "Well, what did they all do?" The speakerphone. Charlie Brown's
don't
teacher.
Do that. That's just like, look, get a Bluetooth earpiece.
Right.
They're cheap. You can get one for like $20 to $30. It works great. You stick it in your ear, and we only hear half of your annoying conversation.
Or, here's another idea. Go outside to talk on the phone.
Yeah, that's what I generally try to do. Or talk low.
Yeah, or talk low.
If you can't hear me, my wife has hearing issues too. She can turn her phone up. If she can't hear me, I'm like, baby, okay, I'll call you back in a little bit. And she goes, okay.
Yeah.
Like, that's actually how that works.
It's not that hard, really.
But, the argument would be, but this is a business call.
Oh, yeah.
Go outside.
Yeah, go outside.
Do business.
Exactly. Well, what was your business, cigar-wise, as you enjoyed yourself without me talking loudly on the phone?
Sorry, after that rant. Those people really drive me nuts. Like, really, like crazy. And you know what's fun to do is you stand next to them, you start answering their questions.
Yeah. And then
you realize... Especially when they're on, like, an elevator or somewhere where you can't get away from. And you just look them dead in the eye the whole time they're doing it, and they look annoyed at you because they're like, I'm
on the
talking
phone.
on the phone.
Yeah.
Like, why are you interrupting my speech? Anyway, I'm done with that. Okay.
Let me just add one more. This is the worst. You're standing in line to check out at the store or a shop or something, and the person in front of you checking out can't be bothered to complete their transaction because they're yapping away to somebody on the phone.
Yeah.
If my phone rings and I'm about to check out, I always say, I'm right at the checkout. Let me call you right back.
Yeah. Or hold on a second.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Anyway.
So,
Your cigar.
all that aside, I didn't actually run into any of that today.
That's
Because
good.
I had the whole lounge to myself for the most part. So my cigar, I went into a humidor and perused, and I thought, I always hit the new cigars first, and I don't know that there's much out right now that I haven't had or was into trying. That's less than like $20 for a cigar. And so I perused. I went around, and I found the Mbombay. Mbombay. M-B-O-M-B-A-Y.
I'm going to go with Mbombay, but then I'm the guy that likes to call that beer, that brewery P-Frem. So.
Right. So the Mbombay Classic Robusto is just such a pretty little cigar, man. It has has a wrapper that covers most of the cigar, and it's very opposite from what I normally get. Like I almost instantly grab a Maduro wrapper.
I'm
like
the same way.
it's just that's my flavor profile.
Kind of a go-to. Yep.
It's kind of like seeing a new lager on the shelf. I'm probably going to grab a Scotch ale or something along those lines but when you see a new lager, it's like, oh, I could get a 6-pack of that. I might not like it. Anyway, so I did this, and this is a Connecticut wrapper on there, a little oily Connecticut wrapper on there, and beautiful little cigar, though, so very opposite what I normally do. I didn't write down what all the wrapper binders
That is a gorgeous band, by the way.
Yeah, isn't it, though? It's
just
very
so
cool.
pretty, yeah.
And anyway, the appearance, light golden brown, smooth and oily on it. Some veins, large ornate wrapper with a closed foot on it as well. So the pre-light sniff on that was sweet and tangy with a light spice and a little bit of hay. It was very nice. It was a good smelling cigar, and put off a nice scent too. It's some cigars you got to get real close to smell. This one had a bit of aroma to it. The pre-light draw I used to clip. It was medium to light draw on it with the clip. The sweet cedar, hay, light aromatic spices going through this were really, really nice. So, like, at that point in time, I'm like, okay, this is going to be really good.
Yeah.
It's going to be like dessert almost because it smelled so sweet and delicious. The initial light on this, sweet, tangy pepper, a little bit of nutty flavors behind it, cedar. And that, I think the sweetness comes from the fact that it was a closed foot. Okay, so you taste that wrapper first.
Right, you're getting that wrapper.
Like that's pure wrapper. And then immediately
that's the
goes
first thing
into
that's
that,
burning and then pulling through the tobacco.
Right, and then you immediately get that initial light kind of pepper burst. So I think that's why I got the sweet, creamy, sweet, tangy, sweet and then tangy pepper, and then a little nutty and cedar flavors. The first third of the cigar, sweet, creamy, nutty. You see this is like a theme going on here, right? A little bit of toast, white pepper. The pepper flavor is way on the back sides of the tongue and in the back of the palate. It's really kind of a nice taste going along with this. That white pepper aftertaste was really nice. Solid ash, perfect burn. Great smoke, by the way. Nice silky smoke, easy to blow.
And it was a Robusto, right?
Yeah, this is a Robusto, so it's 4.5 by 50,
Probably
I think.
about 50, yeah.
I should have wrote that stuff down. I just forgot. I usually put that down first, but I was like, I'm going to light the cigar. The second third of the cigar, sweetness and cedar take center stage on the second third of this cigar, with a solid backing of white pepper. Nutty and toasty flavors move back and leave a little like caraway seed kind of flavor in the aftertaste.
Nice,
It was. I sat and chewed on that one for just a little while, going, "What is that?"
Right.
And
what
when
are you
caraway
tasting?
seed popped in my head, I was like, "That's what it tastes like." So a little bit of that. It was really interesting. Solid ash, perfect burn. Look at the ash and the burn on this cigar. It never wavered. It was like a laser the entire time. The last third of this cigar, cedar and tangy white pepper move forward with a creamy sweet spice following that, toast and tea leaf finishing. That tea leaf started popping up, and it started sneaking in there towards the end of the cigar. I was like, what is that I'm tasting? There's a little bit of that something was in there.
Right.
And there it was. It was the tea leaf on the end. And it's such a great cigar overall. I paid about $8 for this cigar, I think is what it was on the shelf for. I'm giving it a 6.5 on the price to quality, so it gets plus because it's not a very expensive cigar. It's smoked long enough. It smoked for almost an hour, probably 50 minutes for a Robusto. Not bad, and and I was super happy with it.
And
How about you?
Just in case you're new to the show, the price to quality, if you score something a 5, it means you feel like you got exactly what you paid for.
Yes.
Scores less than a 5, it's like, maybe it wasn't quite worth the price. Scores more than a 5, in this case a 6.5. What you're basically saying is this had been a few dollars more, you wouldn't have been disappointed
If
at
I
all.
paid $10 for this cigar, I'd have been perfectly happy with it. But I think I paid less. I think it was actually not even quite $8. I think it was on the top side of 7.
Nice.
But I mean, a great cigar, and the price was nice, and it smoked long enough.
Nice. Well, I did Alec Bradley 2 weeks in a row. I did the Alec Bradley Tempus Presnado last week. And this week I smoked an Alec Bradley Black Market Esteli Torpedo. Now, the Alec Bradley Black Market was a very successful, very highly rated cigar.
Yes.
That was more of a medium body cigar, medium, maybe even on the slightly lighter side of medium, but people loved it. It was a huge hit. And so they had been promising several years back to put out a stronger version,
Right.
something with a little more kick to it, but in the same style. And that's where the Black Market Esteli came from. And it is a really nice looking cigar. And you can see, by the way, the packaging. If you're looking at that picture on our video feed, if you see the packaging, it's gorgeous packaging.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah.
And you'll see once I slide that sleeve off of there, that there's another cigar band underneath it, kind of like your sort of normal size cigar band, but rather than being up by the head of the cigar, it's about 2/3 of the way down. So it's just a really different way to package, and it makes you not see it until you slide that little tube off of there. So anyway, it's a nice looking cigar. Once you get to the actual tobacco leaf itself, it's not smooth. It is veiny. It looks like it's wrapped in a tobacco leaf, which it is.
Right.
So that makes sense. It's got a Nicaraguan wrapper. The cigar is filled with a 4-country mix of fillers from South America. So I'm not even sure what 4 countries they are, but you got to figure Nicaragua, Honduras, maybe Ecuador, and the Dominican. That would be my guesses.
That would be the 4 countries.
That'd be the 4, yeah. The pre-light on this was all earth and leather. Really, really pleasant kind of a pre-light. And both of those would be pretty prominent when the cigar smoked as well. I did get lots of spice as this smoked. I guess it leaned towards pepper, but it seemed more complex than that, than just a sort of a one-note pepper note. And it did that thing that all of my really favorite cigars do, which is that the flavors kind of changed and shifted as I got into the second and third parts of the cigar. The final third was, a bit different from the first and second. Construction was good, although I did get a little bit of an uneven burn. I had to correct it a couple of times. I probably didn't have to, but I did. And once I did that, it burned like a champ all the way down the stretch. So it wasn't anything that frustrated me. But I do like to point that out because, like, I had another cigar this week that burned so perfectly, you were like, wow.
Oh, that
Mbombay.
Mbombay
How did they get it that
was
good?
like that. It was like a laser all the way down.
Yeah. So anyway, I really enjoyed this one. It's definitely full-bodied. Now, when I say that, not as full-bodied as like a La Flor Dominicana or like a Diesel or something like that,
Right.
but definitely full-bodied. My sort of sweet spot is medium full. This was a little bit
little over that.
Little over
plus
that. Yeah, absolutely. It's a $10 cigar. I'm going to tell you it's worth every penny, maybe even a little more. So price to quality for me on this baby will be a 5.5.
Nice.
And the notes on it they were so pleasant. It was earth, it was leather, and a little bit of toast, but that spiciness kept it all so interesting. I love when cigars are interesting. I mean, I can enjoy a good like 1 or 2 note cigar if I like those flavors, but when they do this complex thing and kind of the flavors sort of weave in and out,
makes it fun.
hit the palate at different places, it becomes really fun. And I don't know, like, when I first started smoking cigars, if I would have even been able to appreciate that. It's something that kind of develops. Like if you're a wine enthusiast, you know a lot more about what you're tasting in your wine today than you did when you first started sampling wine.
Like anything else, experience is king. So the thing is, the first time you taste a cigar, you taste smoke.
Right.
Right.
And it could be a pleasant smoke, tobacco smoke, but that's kind of what you get.
As you learn to taste through those cigars a little more, you start being able to separate flavors. Like beers do the same thing, you know. Some people
absolutely.
taste beer and they just taste, it tastes like beer.
Tastes like a beer, yeah.
That's a sweeter beer, or that's a bitter beer, or whatever. But there's not much definition. But once you start exposing yourself to more of those flavors, you start getting to recognize them, and that makes a big difference.
All right, so we're going to talk about those flavors coming up when we do our report, which has long been promised and will finally be delivered, about the flavors and styles that craft beer drinkers seem to enjoy the most. And I think this may surprise you a little bit how different flavors and styles do. So we'll be back with that as we continue to roll for show number 188. We are smoking and toasting. Live in the studio once again, and glad to be here, and we will be right back. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It's Smoking and Toasting, the radio program and podcast is all about craft beer, fine spirits, and hand-rolled cigars. Brought to you by B&B Butchers and Restaurant, 1814 Washington Ave in Houston, and in the shops at Clear Fork in Fort Worth. It's show number 188. We'll be talking to you about great bourbons to drink right now, and several other things. But first, I just want to say hello to a couple of people that I've noticed in the show notes are listening. Steve Richardson, a buddy of mine from high school, that it has been great to. One of those cool things about Facebook, because there's so many things that aren't that cool about Facebook. But one of the cool things about Facebook is when you kind of reconnect with somebody that used to be a big part of your life, and now maybe they live somewhere far away and you don't really see them, and so it's great to be able to connect with you. Steve and I were in a lot of the same classes in school, and Steve, I hope his parents are not listening, because Steve's house was walking distance from the school, like super close. So if we were cutting classes, it was in Steve's room listening to the stereo. That's where we would be. So we had some good times back then. But anyway, Steve, nice to see you on there. And Mark Thompson. Now, Mark Thompson, there are a lot of people in the world named Mark Thompson, but if this is the Mark Thompson I think it is, he's an old radio buddy of mine that I used to work with.
Nice.
Still out there doing the radio thing somehow. I don't know. Well, he has one of the greatest voices I've ever heard. So that's how I think he's able to continue. He's very talented as well, but his voice, when he opens his mouth and speaks, you're like, holy cow! Whatever this guy says, I'm buying it. So that's the guy you want. That's the guy you want as your spokesperson. We are smoking and toasting, and we've been promising this. So maybe Ian, as you open up the Urban Underdog American Lager, maybe I will share finally this list that we've been talking about and have not gotten to. It's about what flavors and styles today's craft beer enthusiasts. These are people who like craft beer, not just the entire. Go ahead. Ooh, that was nice. Not just the entire beer drinking public, but people who liked craft beer were asked about certain styles and flavors. What do you like or dislike about each of the following styles of craft beer? And they were asked to select one option on each of them, either somewhat like or like a lot, or somewhat dislike or dislike a lot. And the number one was, with a 76% like, was clean and crisp. So this should. I see you're turning the viewfinder around. Thank you. This was a perfect thing to announce as we try a lager, which by definition you would expect to be clean and crisp. That's generally one of the
and that's not my thing. I like sweet, big, and ridiculous.
Absolutely. Well, the number two was fruity, with 52% saying fruity, 52% versus 22%. Now, as we go on these, the somewhat dislike or dislike a lot gets a bit higher. At third place, dark beer came in with 50% saying they liked it somewhat or liked a lot, 22% saying, nah, not my thing. Malty was next with 46% positive, 21% negative. Then sweet with 46% positive, but a 25% negative, slightly higher negative on the sweet. Then and only then do we get to hoppy with a 45% positive and a 24% negative. But this actually makes some sense to me because being a guy that likes IPAs, that really likes hoppy beers, I seem to run into, you're an exception to this, but I seem to run into people that fall definitely into one or two categories. Either they love it, like bring on the hops, that's my thing, or they'll say, yeah, I don't really like IPAs. Like, and you run into a lot of those people that we've had a lot of them here that are guests on the show, distillers or people who are reps for different liquor or cigar companies or whatever. We're asking them to sample beers with us, and they'll tell us, yeah, I don't really go for IPAs, although they do, quite frankly, like a lot of the ones that we sample here on the show. So, but it doesn't surprise me that if you ask the question about hoppy, you would certainly get some negative pushback.
Yeah.
Don't you think? Spicy was next with 35% and 35% positive, 29% negative. And here's the first one I would have answered negatively on. I don't care for spicy beers.
I don't really either. I like spicy food.
I love spicy
But
food.
when I drink a beer, I don't like to have a lingering burn in the back of my throat from a spice. And if it's light on occasion, it's okay. And I think that's drink dependent for me. But overall, that's not really my bag either.
I'm with you. Cloudy is the next category, 33% positive, 21% negative.
Okay.
Cloudy. So I guess that's like hazy.
Yeah.
Basically.
I'd say I don't care if it's hazy or cloudy.
Yeah. But see, before the hazy IPA craze, I would have thought of cloudy when I thought of like a Hefeweizen, like an unfiltered wheat beer or something like that. Sour or tart, 31% positive, 36% negative. This being the first time that the negative number is higher than the positive on this list. And finally, bitter with 31% positive but 42% negative. So the thing about bitter beer is it has to be like a really good, like the right kind of bitter. Like I'm thinking about like a great ESB.
Yeah. Well, an ESB though, like even though it's extra special bitters, the bitter beer is not bitter. Is not near as bitter a lot of times as a lot of IPAs. IPAs can have, especially an unbalanced West Coast style IPA, can be as bitter as anything. So, but I think the name bitter has a negative connotation.
I think you're right.
I think when someone says, "Oh, that's bitter," they think, "Oh, that's bitter."
They think it's bitter. You won't
with
like
a bad
it.
face,
Yeah,
not
right.
bitter with a good
Exactly.
face.
The study also asks people who drink beer, how often, if ever, do you drink craft beer? U.S. adults came out 43% drink craft beer at least occasionally to 53% never drink craft beer, which I think the 43% number is actually pretty high.
Yeah.
It actually, if you go to 21 to 34-year-olds, 55% at least occasionally, 37% don't. And then it's dead even for 35 to 54-year-olds at 48% each. And then if you go over 55, it's 32% positive, 66% no, I don't.
You know, I've said it. I've said it before many times. I don't eat spaghetti for dinner every single night.
Right.
I don't. Like, it's not
But you
something
like spaghetti.
that I want. I do like spaghetti, but I don't want it every night for dinner. As a matter of fact, when I make a big old pot of spaghetti, I might like that a couple nights in a row. But when I go out to eat, I'm not going out to eat spaghetti every single time. And then when I go get takeout, I'm not going to get spaghetti every single time. And then when I make food at home, I'm not going to make spaghetti every single time.
Right.
I don't understand how people just drink the exact same beer.
Yeah.
Every single time they drink beer. Like that just boggles my brain a little bit.
I went to my refrigerator one evening this week and discovered I don't have the luxury of a second beer fridge. So I have to keep stocking my beer with my fridge with beer to keep it cold. And I noticed I had put in a vanilla porter. That's not a style I drink a lot.
No, generally not.
I pulled it out and poured it, and it was the perfect beer for that moment. I enjoyed it so much, but I didn't want another vanilla porter the next night.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like it was just at that moment in time. Oh, this sounds perfect, and it was. It was actually quite good. I'll have to get some.
Well, you know, much like you have cravings for certain styles of food from time to time.
Of course,
right? Like
yeah.
sometimes you want Chinese food, or sometimes you want
maybe it's
Greek
Tuesday.
food,
You want tacos.
Right. Tuesday tacos are very important. I don't understand the mentality. There's so many people. It just freaks me out. How this is the beer I drink, Bud Light, and that's what I drink.
Craft beer drinkers also say type, brand, and price are the most important factors when they buy craft brew. Type of beer was number one. So that's like if you wanted an IPA or you wanted a stout or you wanted, a particular style. That's the number one buying consideration. Brand or brewery is second with 36%. That makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm loyal to certain breweries in that I'll try just about anything they put out.
Agreed.
Mm-hmm. Price is third. That's followed by recommendations and reviews with 27%. Alcohol percentage at 24. Here's where Ian answered affirmatively. Region, as in where it's from, 16. Design of the packaging, 10%. And then coming in at 1.2%, what Ian and Cruz said about it on Smokin' and Toastin'.
That's right.
Yeah,
1.2%. Nice.
I made that up. It's not in the article.
Have
Anyway,
you tried this Urban Underdog American Lager?
I have. I haven't said a word about it, but as you can see, I've had most of my. This is delicious.
So I went with the nose, and at first I wasn't getting a lot, but then when I really stuck my nose in there, I got this malty, really nice malty scent to it. I didn't get a lot more other than that. There's not a lot of hoppy or anything going on.
It doesn't have a big nose. You're right. It's just
the flavor is malty with a crisp citrus snap finish.
Yeah, I think that's what I like so much about this. That citrus snap finish keeps it from having
and a malty aftertaste.
That bite, like when you drink like a Pilsner or Kel or something like that. Yeah. I like the flavor, but something about that finish is a little off-putting to me. It just has that little snap. I don't like the way it finishes as much as I like.
To me, that one tastes a little bit like a preservative.
Yeah, right. It's got that kind of almost like a artificial or not quite as fresh taste. And some people like that taste. It's just, to my palate, I don't like it.
That's what Heineken is.
This does not have that at all. That citrus snap, like you said, on the finish really closes this out in a beautiful way, and then
leaves you with just a little malty undertone on the aftertaste that's so nice.
Now, there is one thing that I'm very unhappy with, and that's that my glass is empty.
Let me fix
maybe
that
you
for
could,
my friend.
Maybe you could help me out with that. Then I can go ahead and give this beer. I'm going to give this a big thumbs up. Now, we had a lager on the show last week. It was the one with the lion with the beer glass in his mouth on the show notes. You remember that?
I do.
And I think I like this even better. We liked that a lot. I think I like this even better.
This is
Urban Underdog.
This is really good. Urban Underdog. This is kind of fun because the can, it's obviously printed, but it has this very hand-drawn sketch kind of feel to it.
Yeah, it's very cool.
The city in the background and then the super dog in the front. It's got a dog with a cape and a mask over his eyes.
American Underdog from St. Louis, Missouri, and Urban
Missouri.
Chestnut
Did
is
you
the name
know
of the
that
brewery.
they actually make decent beer in St. Louis, Missouri?
I would almost hate to be a craft brewer, or maybe it would be great to be a craft brewery in St. Louis because you'd be like raging against the machine,
from what I
as it were.
understand, and I could be wrong, but there was a time in St. Louis, Missouri, where if you didn't drink the major brews made in St. Louis, Missouri, I mean, people around you would look at you like,
well, I'll
like
tell
that's
you.
bad. But I have to think that by now, and especially getting a quality lager like this, like first off, if you're in St. Louis, Missouri, and you're making a lager, and you're making one this good, you go, baby. Like that's
and
awesome.
Here's hoping you can get shelf space and taps because those guys kind of rule with an iron fist there. I will tell you a true story. When I was in my 20s, I moved to St. Louis from Florida or someplace. I don't remember where I was at the time. And I was in my 20s, had not really discovered craft beer at that time. I drank the mainstream brews and, enjoyed some of the imports. And I remember when I first moved there, I was staying in a hotel for a couple of weeks that I got put up in. And I walked down to the bar one afternoon, and there were guys sitting at the bar. This is in St. Louis, Missouri, home of Anheuser-Busch. And I remember I walked up to the bar, and I said to the bartender, I think I'll have a beer. He says, what do you want? I think I said, and again, I hadn't even discovered craft beer yet. I think I said, I have a Miller Lite. And a guy sitting at the bar turned and looked at me like this. Like almost threatening because I'd ordered a Miller Lite in St. Louis, Missouri. It's considered like unpatriotic almost.
Yeah.
And the other crazy thing about it, I lived in St. Louis for several years. The other crazy thing about St. Louis is people drink Busch beer by choice.
That's a weird one.
Not because
No, that's a
it's
really
less
weird one.
expensive, they'll it'll be like, hey buddy, can I buy you a beer? Sure. What do you want? I'll have a Busch. What?
No,
I just offered to buy you whatever you wanted.
That's a weird one.
Yeah, I mean,
You know what? I will buy Busch by choice when I'm cooking brats.
Oh, because you like it with sausage.
Well, I mean,
To cook your sausage in.
yeah.
Yeah.
You don't need big flavored porters to cook brats in.
Well, Urban Underdog, the next time I visit St. Louis, which will probably not be for a long time, but I will go to a bar and try to ask for your stuff instead of the local swell there. This is great stuff.
And good job, guys. And I can't imagine what a brewery in that town, what a microbrew in that town has to go through to get their stuff put out.
Well, to get shelf space, but don't you know they have some of the most loyal fans of any microbrewery? People, thank you for saving us from mainstream beer.
Right.
Their fans, I bet, are hardcore.
Oh, I bet. It makes me think. You remember in that Bourbon Barrel Stout and Selling Out book?
Yes.
That was such a good book, by the way. If you guys haven't
we interviewed
read that,
the author. You may remember on the show. He was great.
Get that book, read it. It's so good. But it makes me think about. There's one section in there where he's talking about. He's going to meet with the AB InBev people, and it's a meeting where all the brewmeisters are going to be there, and he's, he gives the feeling that he's a little excited to go meet all these brewmeisters.
Oh, these brewmeisters,
brewing
sure.
I mean, they're
master brewers, yeah,
master brewers, brewing Budweiser beer and stuff like that, and he gets to the meeting and nobody pays attention to him. They don't even think he brews beer. Like they treat him like that.
Wow.
Like your product isn't even a beer, and they treat him like that.
Well,
it's so
I told you
crappy.
about that documentary that I watched. That was about all the different
Amazing.
Budweiser brewery head master brewers from each different brewery around the world, all competing to see who could make the most Budweiser.
Yeah.
Not who could make the best beer, who could make the most consistently Budweiser
Don't make it interesting.
beer. Yeah, don't you dare. All right, we'll try to make it interesting coming up next with a brewery we have huge respect for, the Firestone Walker Brewing Company out of Pasa, Robles, California. They release the Luponic Distortion series regularly, and we have the latest one, and I'm going to be asking Ian to pronounce the flavors that it's supposed to have in it. Because
I got this, baby.
Okay, good. I'm glad you're here. We're glad you're here, too. It's Smoking and Toasting, all about craft beer, fine spirits, and hand-rolled cigars. We'll be right back. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It is Smoking and Toasting. This is the program that's all about craft beer, fine spirits, and hand-rolled cigars. My name is Cruz. My co-host is Ian Barry. Adam on the wheels of steel behind the board, and we are so glad to have you either watching or listening. And however you consume and enjoy the show, thank you so much. And we would love for you to help us spread the word, subscribe, hit the little bell, whatever the right thing to do is for the platform. You guys know whatever.
Yeah, you know what? Even if you never watch YouTube, just go on YouTube, look us up, and hit the like
subscribe.
button and subscribe.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. All it'll do is it'll give you a little thing on the side when we have a new show.
And you hit the bell, it'll give you notifications whenever we post stuff up.
And I've noticed, by the way, and I watch a lot of YouTube because I have the app on my smart TV, so I can just go to it and watch it on the TV instead of on the computer. So I watch a lot of YouTube, and everything I watch, they're like, hey, if you enjoyed this clip, subscribe and tell your friends and hit the bell. And so this is our version of doing that.
Masters of self-promotion.
We appreciate the support. We really do. All right. We have officially begun drinking, so it's time for drinking news. And, Ian, I've been thinking about this week. I really want you to write us a drinking news intro song.
Okay.
And maybe just record a little, something acoustic or whatever you can come up with. It can all be on the bass. I don't care. Just something that we can play when it's time for drinking news. And I know you were responsible for, helping to, put together the intro music that we have for the show, which is just awesome. And I couldn't be happier with our lead vocalist on that thing. I mean,
that was a fun story because I went over a buddy's house. He's like, let's get this done. I was like, okay. And he already had actually most of the music going on. He just didn't know how to turn it around or end it. So I get the credit for that little that little ending thing on there. That's pretty much my input. I'm like,
it's great.
Right?
It's great.
And then he's like, okay, who are we getting to sing? I was like, John Egan.
John Egan is so good. He's perfect.
Like he is.
It is the perfect
I
voice.
love
for
that guy.
Yeah,
he's so awesome.
great. He's great. He occasionally will play sets in the a little bar that's downstairs in my building. So it's great to be able to just wander down, have a few brews, and listen to John play the blues. It's an awesome thing. All right, cool. Now you go ahead and pour that, and I'll read today's drinking news.
Drinking news.
And a reminder that drinking news is not necessarily about drinking. It's not about cigars or spirits. There might be drinking involved in the story, but most importantly, it's a story that you will enjoy most if you are drinking when it is read. So those of you who are in a position to do so, like Ian and I are at this moment, pour yourself something. And let me tell you about the 2 men in Australia who snuck into a bedroom with machetes after being hired to carry out a stranger's sexual fantasy of being tied up in his underwear and stroked with a broom. Oh, it gets better. They discover. Okay, so two men, snuck into a bedroom with machetes after being hired to carry out a man's sexual fantasy of being tied up in his underwear and stroked with a broom. Only they discovered they'd gone to the wrong address. The pair from Sydney, Australia, they made their apologies to the man whose home they had entered with their machetes and broom and left his bedside as soon as they realized their mistake. One of the men, Terrence Leroy, has now been acquitted of a crime in entering the home in July of 2019, intending to intimidate while armed with an offensive weapon, i.e. a machete. The district court accepted his explanation. They said, conceding the facts of the case are unusual, they set out reasons for the not guilty verdict, saying the evidence did not suggest that the men actually intended to harm the guy. They carried the machetes either as a prop or something to use in the fantasy, he said. The fantasy was unscripted, and there was no discretion as to how it would be carried out. According to court documents, the man wanted a broom handle to be rubbed around his underwear. That's what it says in the court documents. And the court documents also say he was willing to pay $5,000 if it was really good. Police said that the
Hold on. I want to talk a little bit of business sense.
Okay.
I hope before these guys went into the wrong house and then ended up with this big court case and everything else, I hope they got paid ahead of time. At least something. Did you get a down payment or something? Because on the contingency that it was really good.
Yeah. I would hope. Police say the intended client had a, quote, history and proclivity for engaging the services of people, end quote. He had made arrangements with a man on Facebook for people to engage in role play and sent his address before he later updated it with a different address where he really lived more than 30 miles away. So I guess when he did the first, contacting somebody to try to get to do this, he gave him a fake address, right? And then he changed it to his real address once he had it all set up, and the guys didn't notice the address had changed and showed up at the first place.
I don't know what that one means.
I don't know what that is either. It sounds like something you would hear in a shopping mall. But the resident of the home where the men mistakenly turned up told police that when he noticed a light on in his lounge at around 6:15 a.m., he assumed it was a friend who visits every day to make coffee. He called out, "Bugger off, it's too early." And after hearing a voice asking, "Is your name Kevin?" The man said he turned on his light to see two men he did not recognize standing next to his bed, both holding machetes. A conversation then ensued. This just gets better as it goes.
The
conversation then ensued, in which the pair repeatedly sought to establish whether or not he was Kevin, each time being told no in response. At one point, one of them asked, "Are you sure you're not Kevin? Because we were told to come here and pick up Kevin." Eventually, they realized their error and left, with one of them saying, "Sorry, mate," and shaking the resident's hand, while the other just said, "Bye." There is your drinking news for Smoking and Toasting, number 188. Yes. See, that music's great, but it will be better when we have an Ian penned drinking news thing.
I just try. What a weird conversation that is.
Imagine how much you must get really turned on by someone with a machete rubbing your underwear with a broom to be willing to offer up to $5,000 for that.
Well, here's the thing, too. Does the guy that hired him gain any culpability for this? Did he give them that address?
Well, I'm sure.
He said because he then updated and changed the address, but apparently he initially gave them that
right.
address.
You would think he would be somewhat responsible for this fiasco.
There if he hired somebody and sent them to that address.
But can you imagine him? He's waiting all night. The guys with the machetes never show up because they went to the wrong house. Oh, man. Yes, for sure. All right, so Firestone Walker, Luponic Distortion. Ian, read that can. Tell me what we're drinking here.
So bossy.
Yes.
It says, keep cold, drink fresh.
Okay.
Firestone Walker, Luponic Distortion IPA series.
But it says at the top. What does
Hints
it say?
of kiwi, lychee, and Fioa.
That's the one I couldn't pronounce. What do you call it? Fioa?
Fioa, Feijoa.
Feijoa.
Yeah,
if Wiki Brian is with us, could you figure out how to how are we supposed to pronounce Fioa?
Fioa?
Feijoa?
Feijoa? Fioa sounds more like it'd be real. I don't know.
I don't know. What do you think of the Luponic Distortion? I mean, this is a super interesting series because
5.9% IPA.
They use a lot of really different hops and try for something just really different in every one.
Distortion is they say, hey, let's see how far out
Let's
we
see
can
how messed up we can make this, basically. And it's not necessarily messed up in terms of trying to make it like stronger or higher ABV. But
yeah, no. This is not trying to build the most brutal IPA you can get. This is at 5.9. It's in the middle range. The nose on this is IPA with a little more malt forward. Right on the nose. There's also a little hint of something funky in there, and not in a bad way. Funky in a maybe kind of good or interesting way. When you take a sip of this, though, the initial flavor of this is IPA, but then there's a little something right at the back of the palate that's different, and then it comes back with the crisp IPA, like I just bit into a Granny Smith apple kind of crispness,
right.
You know?
Well, I will tell you, this is not like this is on the opposite end of the spectrum from like a hazy or juicy, like the IPA that we had last week. Oh, which remind me, I did some research on that. I want to tell you, but go ahead.
Well, this and it also has a very kind of grapefruit. Bitter to the finish or sour to the finish.
It doesn't have that sweeter citrus vibe to it at all.
Right.
But it's got a little bit of that grapefruit tang.
It's like citrus, but the zest, citrus zest. You ever take a bite of the peel on a lime or on a grapefruit?
You know what? Actually, it reminds me of when you're peeling a grapefruit, if you peel off the sort of white stuff in between the rind and the and the pulp itself, if you were to just kind of put that in your mouth and chew on it, there's a little of that kind of zest flavor.
There's an astringency to it too.
Right. It's not bad at all, but it's just it's not like the sweeter pulpy part of the grapefruit. It just gives it I find it surprisingly refreshing. It's not
as interesting as the flavors that we just described, it really actually drinks easier than you'd think.
I agree.
But I think that's the malt profile, because this actually has more robust malt profile all the way throughout the flavor of it than a lot of IPAs, because a lot of IPAs that finish in the citrusy way this does don't have that malt profile.
It's more a hop
to back it
profile
up.
without as much of the malt.
Right. This actually, the malt profile stays pretty solid all the way through it, and it leaves you with a little bit of that. Even after that crisp, astringent bitterness goes away, there's still a hint of that malt going on.
What it kind of tells me is that the brewers at Firestone Walker really know what they're doing. They're using these more experimental hops and these different kind of hops, and they figured out how to balance the flavor that those hops bring by maybe increasing the maltiness in this case in order to come out with a really very drinkable, tasty, and balanced beer. I really like this, but I will tell you, it's perfect for being one of the Luponic Distortion series beers. In other words, this is not a beer that I would necessarily choose over a lot of other IPAs if it were out all the time. But with it being out as limited, I'm like, I want to get some more of these. Yeah,
But
I not
this
only
is
want to try it,
something-
but I want to get some and try several.
This is something, like we said with the I don't eat spaghetti every day thing. This is something that you buy a 6-pack and you try one and go, yeah, it's pretty good, and you toss it in your fridge. And then once in a while you go, oh, I want that. That's
Exactly.
interesting.
No, that's exactly. Speaking of limited series, I absolutely raved, and you really liked it too, about the Hazy IPA we had on the show last week from NOLA Brewing in New Orleans. It was the We Are Liquid IPA.
Yes.
Came in the 16-ounce cans. Go back if you haven't heard the show and listen to the way that we reacted to that IPA. It was one of my favorites in a very long time. I did do some research this last week. It is limited. So I will say to you this. If you are anywhere close to a fan of Hazy IPAs and you see that, buy it and buy it now because it's not going to be around for a long time. I'm actually really bummed because I would have that in my total regular rotation. Now, I will say, I was in Specs earlier this week, and they did still have some. So you should still be able to get it. But I think it came out in February or March, and it's a fairly, I don't know how many months they produced it, but it's a fairly limited time. They have moved on. I know they just released something in combination with Boyfriend called NOLA Boyfriend IPA. And I haven't tried it yet, so we'll have to maybe have it on next week's show and see.
That'd be fun.
And see how it goes. So, all right, we're going to take another break. Thank you for staying with us through Drinking News. We have more to talk about, including 8 bourbons that you need to drink right now.
Right now.
And we'll be trying some bourbon ourselves in the next segment, the Contradiction Bourbon from the guys with the elephant on the bottle, Smooth Ambler. And we'll be right back. It's Smoking and Toasting. Welcome back. It's Smoking and Toasting. It's the radio program and podcast that is all about craft beer and fine spirits.
Nicely done.
And hand-rolled cigars. Well, that sort of invited that particular cadence, So we haven't talked much about. As we do the show this week, the entire country has been just absolutely rocked by, the death of George Floyd, the protests, some of the violence that's erupted. We try to stay away from political things on the show, and I don't want to really wade into that because there are people far more qualified than us to comment on these issues. But certainly our hearts go out to anyone who's been affected by this, George Floyd, his family, anyone who's been affected by the violence. And in so doing, we have to offer our sadness, our condolences to the proprietors of the Lone Wolf cigar shop and cigar lounge, Lone Wolf Cigar Company in Santa Monica, California. The store windows were smashed and the retail space was ransacked several nights ago during one of the many simultaneous riots. They've been serving Santa Monica, California since 1996, and I'll tell you, it's a tough thing to be a cigar lounge in California because the laws are stacked against you. It's really, they really make it prohibitive. Your cigars are so much more expensive than what people can buy in other states because of all the taxes that you've got to pay. And now these guys' store was just decimated. Everything was taken and destroyed, according to the owner of a second Lone Wolf shop in West Los Angeles. They're estimating hundreds of thousands of dollars of damage. And there was Anthony's Pipe and Cigar Lounge on Westlake Street in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Protests there, that store suffered extensive damage. There have been a number of these type of things. So while cigar shop owners are not necessarily worthy of our support any more than anybody else, as fellow cigar lovers, our hearts really go out to these guys. And I hope that I hope that people who live in those communities will do whatever they can to support these guys and help them get back on their feet.
It's such a tough thing because people are rioting, I think, largely because they feel like they can't be heard, and the only way to be heard is to...
I think that's right.
Is to make the loudest noise possible, which is the riot, which is the violence, which is that kind of thing. And
which doesn't help, but I understand what you're saying.
The problematic part of that, the biggest problem of that is what you're rioting against has nothing to do with what you've just created violence against.
Right. And
I don't see how any of that can be justified. Like, how does smashing an electronics store, or a cigar store help your case in any way, shape, or form? And I don't know what the answer is by any means.
Well, if only the cigar store proprietors could do what Apple does. Because if you break into an Apple store and steal a computer or an iPad or a laptop, Apple can track you.
Yeah.
If only we could track somebody who stole cigars or lighters or something, you know?
I don't know. It's just that the senseless violence of it is
Yeah.
what really makes me sad, because it's going to happen, and it's not that the people who are rioting are right. They're not by any means, but at the same time, you're talking about people who feel like they can't be heard.
They feel like they can't be heard,
and
it's
this is the only
absolutely
way to do it. And I'll be honest with you. I've been so frustrated. I've punched a wall. I know. At least
that
to a
feels
certain
like,
degree that there's a certain amount of frustration that you get where it causes, a physical reaction. But it's hard. It's hard to see.
Yeah, and I promise not to come over and drink your best whiskey again.
Damn it, man.
Speaking of whiskey, we have some to try here, and I'm very excited about this bourbon. We have not opened this bottle, so Ian will be cracking the seal on it here while I tell you about a new whiskey, by the way, that's being launched that guess who one of the investors is? It's one of Adam's heroes.
Oh, yeah?
It's Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning is involved in a new whiskey launch. And, it's so interesting because a lot of people, to go slightly off into sports, a lot of people have thought, why isn't Peyton Manning, who's retired now as, one of the most, famous NFL quarterbacks of our time, why isn't he doing play-by-play for football games, or why isn't he, a coach somewhere? I think he's just enjoying retirement and doing, insurance commercials. And now he and Drew Holcomb of Drew and the Neighbors, I don't know if you're familiar with that band. They're kind of an Americana style band. They're offering a new tequila a new whiskey that is supposed to be top shelf Tennessee bourbon whiskey. And it is Sweetens Cove Bourbon, backed by multiple high-profile investors, including Peyton Manning, Andy Roddick, Jim Nantz, the sports announcer, Skip Bronson, and Drew Holcomb, the musician. It comes from South Petersburg, Tennessee, so you might keep an eye out for it. It's named after a golf course that I think they all like to play golf on in Tennessee. Ooh, that was nice. Did any of that spill? Because it sounded very sloshy.
Nope.
Oh, nice. Well, I'm really excited about this. Now, this particular whiskey comes to us, if I'm not mistaken, from West Virginia, Maxwelton, West Virginia, or Maxwelton, West Virginia. I saw a little piece of a documentary recently about West Virginia, and I got to say, it didn't look like that inviting of a place to go.
West Virginia does not. I've known a few people from there.
Yeah, I've been there. I've driven through.
They didn't rave about it either.
Yeah, I've driven through West Virginia, and parts of it are absolutely beautiful. So I can imagine.
Oh, it's
there's
gorgeous
some
to drive through.
Good picturesque spots to open up a craft distillery and blend. So, no, this is a blended whiskey, so I'm very excited about it.
Straight bourbon whiskeys.
But it was named
92 proof or 46% alcohol by volume.
And it was named America's best craft whiskey distillery by USA
Today. It has
Today.
a picture of an elephant balancing on top of a bourbon barrel there.
Mm-hmm.
That's
which elephants are thrilled to do.
They're prone to do. Yeah. Happens all the time.
I will say this has.
Contradiction. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say this has a wonderful nose.
Contradiction is a blend of straight bourbons. The components are wheated bourbon distilled and aged in West Virginia and merchant bottled bourbon that we carefully source. So this is a source. They're being right up front with it right there. We are very proud of our knack for bringing it to you. Great spirits we hand make and excellent spirits we hand select. Contradiction is the opportunity to join in a single sip the convergence of those two very different efforts. So part of this is sourced and part of this is made, I guess, by the distillery is what they're saying. Expertly blended from whiskeys distilled in West Virginia, Tennessee, and Indiana. This is batch number 268, bottled by James. Thank you, James.
Yeah, thank you, James. We appreciate
Thank you, James.
We appreciate your efforts on our behalf. I will tell you,
Maxwelton, West Virginia.
Like I said, the nose on this is just wonderful. Lots of
it smells good.
Caramel sweetness. It's got that wonderful bourbon smell. You know what I'm talking about? That just,
Yeah.
that just, and of course, a lot of people will turn up their nose at a blended bourbon, but there are some great blended bourbons out there. Really wonderful. Your thoughts, sir?
Well, okay. So I like the nose on it a lot. My initial sip on this, I was not very impressed. It took me a second to go, is that it? Then I took a second sip. It's smooth.
So, but I'm hearing you holding back. There's something you don't like here.
It's I like that mineral taste in the back on a lot of you get it on a lot of whiskeys and scotches. You get that mineral water taste. This almost tastes like a processed version of that.
And what do you mean by processed?
I don't know. It's almost like a fake version of it. Like, you know how sugar tastes one way and then sweet and low tastes like
Artificial sugar tastes another way. Yeah.
This tastes. The upfront flavor, the malt profile on this is really nice right up front. It goes into kind of a fruity thing and finishes with a vanilla, but there's something in there. Yeah, I'm not really into this.
See, I'm not finding the same issue with this that you are. But again, your tastes when it comes to whiskey are more refined than mine are. But I'm enjoying the sort of upfront maltiness to it. I'm enjoying that bit of vanilla and maple. And I think I can detect what you're talking about. The sweetener kind of, I don't know how else to describe it.
Yeah, it's an artificial
but it's not bothering me.
Kind of
it's not bothering me. Not bothering me any more than having an iced tea with
like a sweet and low or something.
With a sweet and low in it. Bothers me.
I don't like that at all.
It's, that doesn't.
Something about that flavor I don't really. It tastes a little green to me. It tastes a little young.
There isn't an age statement, I'm sure.
No, I don't think so. And they never said anything about it on the thing. But it tastes a little young to me. So I don't know. This is one of those things where maybe if the price point's at the right place.
It wasn't expensive. I want to say it was $32, something like that, for the bottle. So that's not expensive. Not the cheapest you can buy. I mean, I'm hearing you say if you were comparing this to a bottle of Buffalo Trace, that it doesn't hold up.
I don't think so. Honestly, I don't know that it does. There's a nice vanilla thing that happens right after you swallow.
And I do like that flavor a lot.
But there's something that just lays on my tongue and it tastes preservative or fake sugary or sweet and low or something like that I'm just not.
All right, so
not hitting me right.
I like it better than you do, but I think it's fairly clear that we're not going to be adding this to the list I'm about to read you of 8 bourbons you should really try right now.
Yeah.
Because
right now
you think it probably wouldn't hold up to these. Let me give you what Liquor.com said for the Big 8.
Let's hear it. Liquor.com is a fun place to be.
Newer bourbons that you should try. Number 8 was the Old Fitzgerald Bottled in Bond Spring 2019 edition. It is a $130 bottle of bourbon, so it better be good. But it does come in at number 8. It's from Heaven Hill. Of course, they release a new Old Fitzgerald each spring and fall, and this is the 3rd release in their series. It's in a very ornate decanter, and they say it's delightful, mixing dulce de leche and coconut sweetness with assertive cinnamon and cayenne spice, bottled at 100 proof. So, at number 7, at a $35 bottle, is Legend or Legent, Legent. It's a joint project from Beam Suntory that started with Kentucky in Kentucky with Fred Noe from Beam, who we've had some of his whiskeys before.
Oh, yeah.
And then the chief Suntory's chief blender Shinji Fukuoka worked on this as well. The end result, they say, is a whiskey with concentrated caramel and spice on the nose and palate, which evolves into creamier dulce de leche with tones. If you use a splash of water to water it just a bit. Some of the bourbon was finished in wine and sherry casks, which captures a dried fruit hint. A hint of dried fruit.
I just finished my bottle of that like last week.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah.
Oh, so you've let me say this whole thing, and you could have just told me exactly what it's like.
it's a lot of those
It's
things
good.
that you
Now,
just
what
said.
what turned you on to this? Was it knowing that it came from Fred No, or what was it that
It was a
made you
gift.
It was a gift.
It was a gift. So
That's an awesome gift.
So I got it, and then
They spent $35 on you, by the way.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's, I've got no problem. You know what?
Yeah.
A well-selected $35 gift is worth way
awesome.
more than
Yeah.
$200 throw away.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I'd throw
Kind-
away the $200.
Kind of like when a
gift, but
friend
get
buys
it.
you like the cigar scissors that you've been lusting after all this time, and they weren't really all that expensive, but it was the perfectly thought out gift.
It's right.
You know when
and
that
then
happens?
that friend returns the favor by giving you a bunch of malt liquor.
Yeah. Oh, but yeah. See these with friends like these, as they say. At number 6, the King of Kentucky, a 2019 release, the second edition of the brand from Kentucky's Brown-Forman, an homage to a brand that started in 1881 that Brown-Forman acquired in 1936. So it's been out there for a long time. It was a limited edition, only 2,100 bottles done, and it is a $250 bottle of whiskey. King of Kentucky,
King of
2019.
Kentucky.
At number 5, also at $125, the Kentucky Owl Confiscated. This bourbon, they say, comes with a history lesson, and it tells the story of a distillery first built in 1879 where they made whiskey until the feds came knocking in 1916, seizing a warehouse of Kentucky Owl barrels. Thanks to Prohibition, the brand faded away, at least until his great-great-grandson, Dixon Dedman, resuscitated it in 2014. Confiscated is a nod to the barrels that were confiscated by the U.S. government. And this is a rounded and weighty sipper, they say, opening with allspice and cinnamon and evolving to concentrated espresso, mocha, and maple, braced up with a faint citrusy note. At number 4, finally one I might be able to afford, the Freeland Spirits Batch number 3. Run by a trio of women, this distillery in Portland, Oregon, opened its doors in summer 2018 and launched its bourbon the following fall. It's a teardrop-shaped bottle, and it's a blend of 3 and 12-year-old bourbons, and they say it is wonderful. Look for toffee, orange peel, and clove, finishing with an oaky accent. At number 3, boy, did they nail this one. Four Roses Small Batch Select.
Oh, that's a great
at
whiskey.
$63 a bottle, marking the first permanent addition to the Four Roses portfolio since 2016. It's a new bottling released in April of last year, commemorating the grand reopening of this Kentucky
I want to point out to
distillery.
everybody listeing, at 63 bottles, you are getting an amazing
At
$63.
At $63 for this bottle, yeah. Talk about being worth it, price to quality, right? At number 2, Bondi. Bondi. It's a $38 bottle of bourbon. It's a 100% corn small batch bourbon made in Minnesota, but it's named for the iconic beach in Australia called Bondi Beach, where the producers say they were when they first decided, let's make bourbon.
Nice.
So they went all the way back to Minnesota and the cold and started making bourbon. They say the oak flavor dominates, vanilla and almond give way to a burst of baking spice and a dry finish. Number 1, Bardstown Bourbon Company, Fusion Series number 1. And I will tell you right off the bat that from the photo of this that's in the article, it actually looks very much like the style of the bottle that the Bob Dylan
I've had a
whiskey
Bardstown before.
is in. So, interesting. So, what was your
I
take on the
almost
brand?
think that we brought it on the show real early.
We may have.
But I don't think it was that bottle. It was good. I remember
This-
it being good. This was years back.
This, they say, it's a $60 bottle. They say it's a part of a trio of bourbons released by Bardstown. The bottling blends 40% 11-year-old Kentucky bourbon, the source is not specified, with 42% 2-year-old high rye bourbon and 18% 2-year-old wheated bourbon, both from Bardstown bourbon. The end result, they say, is a spice-forward sipper that unwinds long ribbons of vanilla, almond, and maple. That sounds delicious.
That does sound
It's
really good,
bottled
yeah.
at about 100 proof, so add water to taste. So there's the big 8.
The Big 8.
The Big 8. Right now. All right, so right now.
I don't know. Oh, which one is it? Which one is it?
Just press any one at random. When you can't find one.
No, that's not what I was looking
That wasn't
for.
okay. So much for my idea of pressing anyone at random. So we're going to take a quick break and come back with our final beer. And I'm excited for you to try this because, again, our final beer is the Scottish Wee Heavy from Zaftig Brewing Company. Zaftig is, I mean, that's you got to be pretty confident in yourself to name your company Zaftig because Zaftig means like a plump woman, right?
I don't know.
I know it's plump. I know meaning is plump. I don't know if it's only I don't know if it's only the feminine gender or not. Maybe Wiki Brian will weigh in. Boy, we owe him some drinks or something for being our professional commentator here. All right, so we'll be right back with a little bit of the Zaftig Scotch Ale, the Wee Heavy, and a little bit more craziness in our final segment here. It's Smoking and Toasting. Welcome back. It is Smokin' and Toastin'. We are the radio program and podcast that is all about craft beer, fine spirits, and hand-rolled cigars, as well as super ultra authentic sound effects. How do you even get a sound effect that authentic?
Amazing. It's almost like I actually opened a beer.
Almost
like
as
you
if
were
it was
there to
the
hear
real thing. Yeah. Welcome to the show. We are so thrilled to have you guys hanging out with us for show number 188. Thank you so much for getting us halfway to 200. We appreciate it. Ian, there's a website I want to hip you to. It's called virtualtaproom.com.
Virtualtaproom.com.
Yeah, and I haven't gone through the whole process on it, but basically you go and register, and if you're quarantined and having a beer, they find you a virtual drinking buddy. So they like match you up with somebody else. It's kind of like a dating site, except you're not dating, you're just drinking buddies.
Match.com for beer.
That's right. Match.com for people who are having a beer right now. It's a pretty awesome thing. So people go check it out, virtualtaproom.com. You know, there's always that pleasure. If you like go into a bar and you're sitting at the bar and you're having a beer or some whiskey or whatever, and you know somebody sits beside you, you don't know them, and you just strike up that conversation and you enjoy just chatting with this complete stranger. I'm kind of antisocial by nature, and even I enjoy that in the right situation. So especially if you and I are both fortunate. We both have like a wife that we're kind of stuck in the house with when we're stuck in the house.
Right.
So it's not, we're not sitting there all alone. If you're all alone, you don't want to drink alone. Virtualtaproom.com seems to me like a pretty cool way for you to like find yourself an online drinking
buddy.
Yeah. So
social by proxy, right?
And it's not like having to do a big Zoom conference or anything. You're just like hanging out with somebody, you know.
So this is interesting. I poured us this.
Now this is a Wee Heavy. I think it's a 2018, is it not?
Yes, it's 2018.
So Ian, explain to our listeners, in case they don't know, what Wee Heavy means when it comes to beer.
Well, so Wee Heavy and Scottish Ale are interchangeable.
Mm-hmm.
That's the same style of beer, and it's just a different name for the same thing. Wee Heavy is it's a heavier flavored beer, and you can see even in the cup, you can see it's more viscous.
Yeah, it's got a viscosity to it for sure.
Yeah, it's a little full, and I like the artwork on here has Zaftig in cool lettering above it. Then it has the hot chick with a beer and a much lighter beer than the Wee Heavy in her glass because it's straw colored. And then she's standing by a giant barrel there. So I'm describing all that because my friend Josh that listens to this show only listens to the show and never actually watches it. So I have to describe it for him.
So I just looked up Zaftig online in the dictionary. And it's Zaftig, it says adjective of a woman having a full rounded figure or plump.
Oh, I'm for it.
Okay, so that's a that's what the beer is. That's what the beer is putting out there.
It says super malty with hints of fruit and grassy British hops, followed by a touch of roasted barley. Walking around in a kilt with face paint optional.
All right, Ian. Have you tasted yet?
No, I haven't. It's funny because I first poured it in. It was really cold when you handed it to me.
Mm-hmm.
When I first poured it in the cup, I was a little alarmed at how little nose I got from it. But in just a few moments that it's been in the
As
cup,
it's warmed up a little bit.
like I can actually start smelling it. Just
Well,
took a moment.
If you had handed me a glass of this, especially if it were a degree or two warmer, and told me it was a barley wine, I probably would have believed you.
It has some of that raisin / date kind of
has
fruit,
that really dark fruit smell.
It's very fruity.
And nothing in it. It's got the maltiness. Nothing in it that would make it not taste like a barley
it
wine.
has like a hint of apricot and a hint of.
In fact, it has more of a barley wine flavor to it to me than
Dark
some of the
cherry,
American
kind
barley
of bitter
wines we've
kind
had.
of thing going on. And I'm just nosing it right now. And as I hold it in my hand and it warms up, it's just the nose is blossoming.
Well, I can't wait for you to taste this because this, to me, seems like this is so spot on for you in terms of what I know you to like.
This is delicious.
Yeah.
Remember I said that dark cherry note in there? That's huge.
Yeah. Oh, it's
on the
very, very
first
big.
sip.
Yes. Dark cherry, a little bit of the date and raisin.
The date and raisin,
and
There's
apricot?
a little orange zest and maybe
yeah,
apricot in
yeah.
there as well. The apricot pit kind of area.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, I wasn't expecting. That's a broad range of flavors going
And some
on.
baking spice as well. That very yeasty sort of baking spice-ish, sort of like the flour on top of the biscuits.
Yeah, there's
taste.
the on the retro hail, you can get that char from the barrel and
Right.
a little of the oakiness on the aftertaste in the retro hail. That really, this is really, really good.
Yeah, I had a feeling you were going to like this, even though I hadn't tasted it yet. So,
Really, really good. And it's not just the hot chick on the bottle.
now, Ian, do you know? I know that barley wines age well, as long as you don't age them for
This
too
is
long.
from Ohio. Ohio is brewing this kind of beer.
Yeah, isn't that
It's
crazy?
amazing.
I know barley wines age well, and stouts can age well. Are we heavy something
Yes.
Scottish ales, or do they improve with
Yes.
age?
Oh, yes.
As long as you don't age too much. I was reading an article about that. Even beers that you might want to cellar or age for a while,
Speaking of which,
you don't want to do for too long. You don't want to
Speaking
do
of
for
which,
20
I hate
years.
to take away from how amazing this beer is, by the way.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, I have a collection of St. Arnold beers, Divine Reserves, and some Bishop's Barrels. And we're gonna need to drink them.
Oh,
'Cause some
I'm
of them
all
are getting
I'm
past
all
that.
for it.
Some of them are gonna get past that prime.
So what is that prime in your, like, when do you start to say, okay,
There's
we got to
4
drink
years
this?
on some of them,
Okay.
and maybe a little longer on some others, but
Mm-hmm.
most of them are 4 years or newer.
And then there are some other styles of beer, of course, that really aren't good unless they're extremely fresh. Like I remember when you and I finally got a hold of a bottle of Pliny the Elder.
Yes.
And it was okay, but it was definitely past its peak, and we knew it. We drank it anyway and enjoyed it.
IPAs need to be drank fresh, unless
The fresher, the better, generally,
unless
for
you
IPAs.
get into the super big IPAs.
Mm-hmm.
If you get into like a like the double IPAs and the really big ones, those actually age well. But a regular IPA, Pliny the Elder, the Art Car IPA, all that stuff, those need to be drank fresh.
As fresh as
Your
possible.
juicy
yeah.
IPAs, you don't store those. You drink them.
You want them. You want them. Not only do you want them fresh, but they're going to taste the best when
Yeah.
you actually have them at the tap room.
Yeah,
When
I
they're
mean,
right out of the tap and
fresh,
as fresh as
That's-
it can be.
That's
Yeah.
when you get it. But there are certain beers that taste fine, fresh, but taste great after you store them for a year. Or so.
And I'm guessing this is that kind of beer, this Zaftig.
Yeah, and this is a 2018, so we got 2 years on this already. This
Mm-hmm.
is what it just says 2018. I don't know what month, but we got 2 years on this already, and this is outstanding. This is absolutely fantastic.
I love seeing you this happy with a beer.
Yeah,
Especially
I'm a little
since
giddy with it.
I think I disappointed you with the bourbon today. So
we don't get a lot of disappointing drinks on
well,
here.
we've been accused of liking everything, which is actually not at
Yeah.
all true.
And I will just say that Smooth Ambler, to me, it's
the Contradiction Bourbon. And so these guys didn't get named America's Best Craft Whiskey Distillery by USA Today, I think, based on just this. It was probably based on a lot of their other
was
offerings.
it this? The question is because they have this thing on the here. It says America's Best Distillery, and then the Reader's Choice Best Craft Distillery, and it says #1 Smooth Ambler. But that's not the Contradiction Bourbon. That just happens to be one they put out. So I don't know. I'd be definitely interested in trying some different things from them.
Yeah.
I'm just not a big fan of this particular bottle.
Well, and maybe that's what we'll have to do. Maybe we'll have to try something else from these guys.
I'd love to give them a second chance and see why they have that name on there, because it's not that bourbon. I don't think that bourbon stands up to a lot of bourbons in that same price.
Well, and it's worth noting that this little banner on here doesn't say that this particular bourbon was named
now,
best.
All of that being said, is it a bad bourbon? I don't like, if that was a bottle on my shelf right now, I wouldn't dump it down the drain. It's not that kind of bad.
Well, I enjoyed it. I would drink this.
It's okay.
Yeah.
That's one, though, that I would immediately take over to a buddy's house late at night and be like, okay, if we want to just sit and have some whiskey,
right.
let's
yeah.
Kill the bottle.
Break this out when the friends come over. Yeah, yeah. And and hide your good stuff. Yeah, yeah.
No, I mean, like,
see, this
it's
is
not
my problem.
Undrinkable. I don't really like it that much.
So this is my problem when the kids come over, and the kids enjoy, craft beers and spirits. And when they come over, like, I can't pull that stuff on them because they can listen to the show, and they go. So if they were to come over and I go, hey guys, I'm going to try this Smooth Ambler. Have you heard about Malort? They're on to me. Is what I'm saying.
So I have a buddy that lives around.
I have to break out the good stuff.
I have a buddy that lives around the corner from me, and it's funny because I like to go over there and we sit around. Sometimes it's just me and him and his wife, and he doesn't even get off work until a lot of times 11 at night. So I'll go over there at 11 o'clock, and I'll hang out till about 2. It's 3 hours is not that long. It just happens to be kind of late at night, and I stay up late most of the time anyway. But I'll bring whiskey over, and we had that bottle of Screwball. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
That we were not fans of.
We were not at all.
Can't accuse us of liking everything.
No,
we were not fans. And apparently, what's his name from the Foo Fighters really likes it.
Oh, that's right. I remember Dave Grohl. It's like his favorite whiskey.
Yeah, he's a huge fan of
it.
And then it started selling me. Man, I brought it over there, and I was like, hey, I'm just going to leave this here because they have friends over all the time.
Sure.
And they're in with the Renfest crowd, so they have a lot of Rennies.
Yeah. Rennies.
So
is that what they're called, Rennies?
Yes, they're called Rennies.
Okay, gotcha.
So the people that work at the Renfest, and I'm like, just let your friends drink it.
Yeah,
I know this is not in it. Dude, they still have some. That was like 7 or 8 months ago I dropped that bottle off, and they still have some in the bottle. That's how.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, yeah. Send it to Dave Grohl.
Send it to Dave Grohl.
Dave, keep recording songs. We'll send
it.
you some of this.
Dude, that dude is awesome, by the way.
He is, by the way. He wrote, there's a couple of things to just wrap up the show that you might want to look for if you're at all interested in Dave Grohl. The first was that he wrote an article with his pandemic playlist. Oh, it's brilliant. And not just brilliant because of the songs that he chose, but what he says about each one of them and how incredibly insightful he is. This guy could have been like a book author and been successful. And then he wrote an article about being anxious for us to be able to return to a time when people can go out and see live music again, and why he feels like that's important. And when a musician writes something like that, you feel, oh yeah, this is self-serving. He just wants to get his money train cranked back up. But it doesn't come across that way at all. It's like he really is identifying with why this is important for people, why it matters to be able to be at a live music show. And I read it and thought it was one of the most insightful things that I'd read all year. So search Dave Grohl live music or search Dave Grohl pandemic playlist in Google, and you'll enjoy reading both of those. I have enjoyed today's show number 188. We are halfway to 200 and feeling good about it at this point. Ian, again, I said this last week, but it's fun being back in the studio with you.
Woohoo! Yeah.
It's nice being able to share this wee heavy instead of just drinking it myself on Skype with you on the other end of Skype and not being able to see your reaction to it. Have a great week, my friends. Thank you to everyone involved. Thank you to everybody that was checking us out online today as we did the show live. And thanks to Adam on the Wheels of Steel. Have a wonderful week. Keep smoking and keep toasting. And do I have anything left to toast with? Here. I do. A little tiny bit of this. Oh, wow. You refilled. Nice going, brother. Cheers.
That was